It's time to draft, and we opened up Shipbreaker Kraken. I'm just going to highlight that because it's most likely the pick here. Magma Jet, Disciple of Phoenix, Divine Verdict. Yeah, none of the other cards come close. I would expect Magma Jet to be picked next, and I think that Disciple of Phoenix is a little better than Divine Verdict, but I would expect these two cards to be picked next out of this pack. Well, after the Magma Jet, of course. So here the rare is missing. There's a Triton Tactics, which can be quite the blowout. Karametra's Acolyte is okay, but not amazing. And Kragma Warcaller I still haven't seen truly good Minotaur deck, sadly I have to say. Observant Alseid is really good. I think it's one of the better cards in white decks in general, but also in the heroic archetypes, because it's a solid creature on its own, which isn't really true for Hopeful Eidolon, which is why I think that Observant Alseid is better. I don't like to overload on tricks in this format because there are so many of them, so I'm going to go for Observant Alseid here, which I think is the best common in the pack, and only Triton Tactics comes close to this card. Okay, people are taking the rare and the uncommon in front of us. Shipwreck Singer is really nice, and we might want to combine it with Shipbreaker Kraken, not only because of the name. Verika's Cure is okay, and Leaf Crown Dryad is really good, but I think I'm gonna go with Shipwreck Singer here, simply because we have the Shipbreaker Kraken already, so we can build a nice theme deck. It's already in blue, and we have a blue card, so we aren't opposed to just drafting a blue-black deck, which is always the cost of picking the gold cards, of course. Okay, the cards I like in this pack are Scholar of Athreos, but only if the colors match up, Ill-Tempered Cyclops, and Sip of Hemlock. I think that Return Centaur is actually quite playable, not only because of Griptide, but also because of Scry, and it's a solid body. A 2-4, having 4 toughness in this format is a lot, so this is definitely not a bad card. I still think that Sip of Hemlock, it has to be higher up on the pick order list, and I like following up these 3 picks by a black removal spell. Just feels better than going for a red card or even one of the white cards. Oh wow, Foil Reaper of the Wilds. It's pretty late for a 5th pick. And so is Nemesis of Mortal. It's a pretty good green card. If you've ever played against it, it turns into a 10/10 really quickly. Viper's Kiss, Fate Foretold. None of these other cards come remotely close. I'm going to take Reaper of the Wilds. I don't know why it's still in there, but it's definitely a powerhouse, so I'm just going to take it. Don't know if you are going to be able to play it, but it's definitely an option. Okay, so most of the cards we've picked so far are black, which means that Blood Troll Harpy is quite interesting for us. If we think that we might end up in green because of the Reaper, then Time to Feed is also quite nice. I think that Mnemonic Wall and Aqueous Form are both weaker than the alternatives, but also we don't have the deck for Aqueous Form, and we don't have the targets for Mnemonic Wall. So the pick here is really between Time to Feed and Blood Troll Harpy, in my opinion, with the Blood Troll Harpy fitting a bit better into the colors that we've seen so far. Just going to take that to make sure that we have a couple of black cards, and then we are still free to decide if we end up in black-green or black-blue. Okay, and this is the pack where we have to decide if we prefer green with Feral Invocation or blue with Wavecrash Triton. Now, being in black-green, we can definitely use the Feral Invocation. Being in black-blue, we can use the Wavecrash Triton, but mostly as a 1/4 blocker, which is already fine. I don't really see us targeting Wavecrash Triton all too many times. Now, the thing is that we already have Shipbreaker Kraken and Shipwreck Singer, and only the Reaper of the Wild, so it's more likely to end up in blue, so I'm going to take the Triton, which does make it a bit worse if we end up in black-green after all, but it's still very possible to just splash the Reaper and Opaline Unicorn could help us do that, so I'm going to take it instead of Flash Mad Steed. Disciple of Phoenix, Wield, which I wasn't expecting, which is a good sign. I like it better than Return Phalanx, even though having a couple of good 2-drops is also good. Black is the one color where you can actually go for more of a control approach, and the Disciple is great in that regard. If black is open, then the 3/3 guys for 2 should come around anyway. But Disciple of Phoenix is a card that is valued very highly by the black devotion decks. We won't really be able to use any of these cards. Could pick the Catoplepas, but I can't really see playing it. So Shredding Winds is a potential sideboard card, even on the splash. Oh, and look at that, a Return Phalanx coming around. The Centaurs are also nice, but I'm still hoping that we can just be black-blue with a splash for a green. And all these black cards, wow, yeah, nobody's picking up the black cards. We are definitely in a great color here. Picking up Shipwreck Singer and Sip of Hemlock, and then another 6 black cards in the remaining packs. So we have all the black options now. Oh wow, we opened a Whip of Erebos, which we probably just slam here. Centaur Bellmaster and Sealock Monster in the 2 colors that we are still considering. But the Whip is amazing, and we are heavily black. We might actually be mono black, or just play one of our other rares, so no reason to deviate from that. And here we have Anthosa, Citizen Hero, which I don't think is all that great in... well, I just don't think it's all that great. The heroic effect is really difficult to pull off, and it's not a combo trick, it's just, yeah, I get to attack with 3 of my lands that I won't be using for mana this turn, and yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this card, even though it has nice base stats. There's a Griptide in the pack, and a Nimbus Naiad, and the black cards aren't really competing with that. I'm not going to pick Anthosa because I expect this deck to be heavily black, and I don't want to have a double green card that I won't even be able to use all that well. I think that Nimbus Naiad is better than Griptide because it's the more proactive card and it's good in almost all situations. I'm going to take it, and then hopefully we can be black-blue and still decide whether to splash the Reaper. Okay, another Anthosa. Farika's Mendo, so green cards coming around. There's Traveler's Amulet, Baleful Eidolon, and Prescient Chimera. So at this point, I'm going to do a cost sword. We definitely need some early defense still, and we do know that we are heavy black, so this makes the Baleful Eidolon interesting. And we already have quite a few expensive cards, with the Prescient Chimera also having the disadvantage of being double blue. So I think that Baleful Eidolon is the pick here. I would like the Amulet to make sure that we can play the Reaper, but I don't think it's the pick here. Okay, Dark Betrayal, Burnished Heart, Prescient Chimera, and Traveler's Amulet are all viable options here. If we want to splash the Reaper, we would love to have a Traveler's Amulet just to play a Forest and the Amulet, rather than having to play multiple Forests. Burnished Heart, in a sense, helps for that as well, but you can never be sure if you will be able to activate its ability. It's great with the Shipbreaker Kraken that we have, though. I'm not sure which card we really want from this pack. I'm pretty sure it's not the Chimera, but one of the artifacts, but even that is pretty close. Just gonna go with the Burnished Heart because it does search for 2 basic lands, so it's just a more powerful effect if we ever get to it. And then hopefully this will allow us to both splash the Reaper and activate the Kraken, if possible. This pack is interesting, one of the heavy black packs, because nobody at the table seems to be drafting black. Return Phalanx is worse than Farika's Cure in my opinion, but Insatiable Harpy is really nice. I like it a lot, even if we can't make it huge. We do have a couple of bestow creatures already, so having the Harpy is is just awesome, and Firika's Cure isn't amazing, especially if we are going to be 3 colors. This pack doesn't have much. I've basically stopped playing Unknown Shores because if you want to fix your mana with an Unknown Shores, and then it's neither a forest, so the Reaper costs 5, and it's not an island, so the Shipbreaker Kraken might cost 7, and it's just really clunky. It also doesn't cast your black spells efficiently, so yeah, I'm really not a fan of Unknown Shores. There isn't much in here, but I'm just going to pick Guardians of Meletis because it's great against some of the more aggressive decks. Having a 6 toughness wall on 3 can make all the difference when you're trying to catch up with your opponents. Here we have the option to just pick a 2-drop or Fate Foretold. Fate Foretold, not the greatest card ever. It's nice with Wave Crash Triton, and it's definitely more powerful than Bronze Sable, which is just really mediocre. Just going to take it. A Light Horizon Scholar, which you'll see quite often in this format because you can't have too many 6-drops. The alternative is a Fellhide Minotaur, which of course isn't amazing either. We do have 2 6s already, so the Scholar would make that 3. We do have Burnished Heart, and we could just play 18 lands in this kind of deck. I think I'm just going to take it, and then from this point on we really have to prioritize cheap cards, which Sealock Monster isn't. Fellhide Minotaur might be the pick over Sealock Monster here, simply to keep our curve a little lower. Yeah, I kind of like the Minotaur. It's only a random 2/3, but it has black in its casting cost, so it makes Disciple of Phoenix work better. And we have so much late game that I'm not going to take the Sealock Monster here. Boon of Erebos is unlikely to get played, but we'll just take it. There's a Traveler's Amulet, so we can go with 17 lands and the Amulet. And all of these cards aren't really relevant. Okay. This is already looking quite nicely, and then we can hopefully pick up some more cards in the 3rd pack, prioritizing curve and maybe a couple of removal spells. Alright, it looks like we opened a Perforos, which we can't use in our deck, but there's Erebos' Emissary, Read the Bones, Verika's Cure, Viper's Kiss, Cavern Lampet, so a lot of black cards that we would be interested in. Probably the Verika's Cure more than the others. The question is if that's better than Erebos' Emissary. Now, first pick, first pack, the Emissary is always going to be better, but we already know that we are going to be a control deck at heart, and I like to have a couple of cheap removal spells in these kind of decks, otherwise it's very easy to lose to something like a Wingsteed Rider. And as weird as it sounds, I just don't think that this card is particularly amazing in a control deck, because discarding your high-end creatures is also quite the cost. We won't have a plethora of 2-drops to discard to the Emissary. I'm going to go with Verika's Cure here in the hopes that Read the Bones potentially tables. And then we have this pack with Griptide, Lash of the Whip, and another Nimbus Naiad. We did pick up a removal spell last pick, so now we could pick the Naiad instead of Griptide or Lash of the Whip without feeling too bad about it. Lash of the Whip is also black, and we've seen that black cards are tabling at this table, so I'm going to pick Nimbus Naiad, which I also think is the better card, but our deck is lacking a bit in removals, so I was tending towards the Lash of the Whip. Also because we won't be putting up so much tempo, and we won't have an attacking force most of the time. I'm not interested in Ordeal of Thassa or Griptide as much. Okay, Cutthroat Maneuver, probably not the card for this deck. Fate Foretold is only okay. Viper's Kiss is kind of nice. We already have one though, and we probably wouldn't want to main deck 2 of them. It's kind of a nice solution to most of the cards that your opponents can play. I'm looking at this Nessian Asp, thinking that we could potentially just splash both the Reaper and the Asp, because the Asp is just so good. And all the other cards aren't really all that interesting. Yeah, I'm just going to do that. And now there are more green cards, but of course we aren't interested in playing too many green cards. We now would probably play 2 forests and then have the Traveler's Amulet and the Burnished Heart to find a forest, which is sufficient. You don't really need 2 forests for this. Well, it's nice to have 2 forests for the ability, but it's not a high priority. Could pick a Crackling Triton, but this one is not making the deck, not with the other cards that we have on 3 already. Could pick a Leaf Crown Dry, but that would just be a hate draft because I can't really see splashing that. So I'm going to take a sideboard card in Gainsay, although I'm not thrilled to pick this. Alright, Grey Merchant of Asphodel is competing with Read the Bones. We definitely don't have a Grey Merchant of Asphodel deck per se, but that doesn't mean that the Grey Merchant isn't going to be good. It's just not going to be back-breakingly amazing, but it is a 5-drop, which we can still support. We have Rip of Erebos, and we have a minor Black Devotion theme, so I have to pick the Grey Merchant, and I'm hoping that the Read the Bones from earlier tables, but if it doesn't, then I'm still happy that we have a Grey Merchant. What's better than one Grey Merchant of Asphodel? Yeah, this is definitely the pick here. Morgus Marauder is sometimes even better than the Grey Merchant in my experience, but this deck, like I said, isn't keen on attacking, so having a second Grey Merchant is definitely awesome. And wow, this isn't the pack that we started with, where the Erebos' Emissary was competing with Verika's Cure, but there is also Read the Bones, so it's kind of a similar decision. Now, Read the Bones is going to cost us some life, but it is a card that I really want in a deck that's looking like this, because it's kind of easy to run out of steam when you're trying to go the control route. And for the same reasons as earlier, I think that we don't need, or we don't necessarily want, the Emissary in our deck. Here it's Flesh Mad Seed or Scorchmark. I like the Scorchmark quite a bit. I would only pick the Flesh Mad Seed if we needed it for early defense, but I don't think that's the case. It's very possible that we won't be playing the Scorchmark. It's still fine to pick it though. I'm going to go with the second Read the Bones here. The way I envision this deck to work is a very late game centric approach, so I'm going to build it accordingly, and the Read the Bones are going to prevent me from flooding. Alright. And another Returned Centaur that we might actually play. Okay, let's see if we can make a deck out of this. One thing that I've noticed is that you really very often have so many playables that it gets kind of difficult to decide which cards you don't really want. And it's the same here. I mean, I haven't started cutting cards yet, but still, even after we do that, we are going to be sitting there with quite a lot of potential playables that we can't all support. So it's really going to be about which cards help our main strategy the best. Okay, so this is, I think, what is left after we take out the cards that we kind of obviously don't want, and then we still have a lot of cuts to make. So we have the Wave Crash Triton, but we have no other reason to go for any kind of heroic shenanigans. So Scourgemark and Fate Foretold are a lot weaker. We also have a lack of removal, so playing the Viper's Kiss might be a good idea, because otherwise we only have Verika's Cure and Sip of Hemlock to get rid of problematic creatures, which might not be enough. Okay, so this would potentially be 7 non-creature, non-land cards, and we want 18 mana sources, so Traveler's Amulet plus 17. 7 plus 17 is 24, so that leaves us with only 16 creatures, and we have 22 up there, which basically means that we have to cut a couple of them. I'm still not sure if we should play all the high-end stuff, especially the Splash Nasty. And we have quite a lot of cards that we don't want in the 3-drop slot. For example, Bloodtor Harpy isn't very good. When we have 2 Nimbus Naiads and the Harpy actually costing us a life is just worse. I think that's an easy cut. Fellhide Minotaur is also not amazing. On the other hand, I don't want to cut too many cards that have black in their mana cost simply because of the 2 Grey Merchants. So this is kind of the line that we have to walk here. Guardians of Meletis, I think, fits very well into this deck, but is just a little bit on the weak side when you look at the other cards that we have available. I kind of like the Return Centaurs, though. They fit well into the curve. They protect from most of the creatures in the format, many of which have 3 power. So having the Centaur on 4 isn't the end of the world. I could see just cutting most of these cards, though, because we still need to cut 5 cards if these are the spells that we want to be playing. It's possible that we should just put the Viper's Kiss in the sideboard, because we have no guarantee if it's going to be doing anything at all. On the other hand, there might be matchups where we are very happy to have an early play because of the 2 Read the Bones that we want to play. I think Guardians of Meletis, Fellhide Minotaur, and the 2 Return Centaurs are the weakest cards in the deck, which adds up to 5 and leaves us with Burnished Heart, Opaline Unicorn, 2 Nimbus Naiads, and Wavecrash Triton on 3. 2 and 3 is very important because after that, if the board is somewhat stable, we can start reading the bones, and then our late game is also prone to take over. We could say that having 3 6-drops is a little bit too many, so cutting the Horizon Scholar for one of the defensive cards is also an option. Fellhide Minotaur, for example, or maybe the Return Centaur. If we play 17 lands, Traveler's Amulet, Burnished Heart, and Opaline Unicorn, though, we do want to have a lot of late game stuff. So I think what we do is play like this, and then if we notice that our opponents are very aggressive and we need more defense, then we can still change that up during boarding. Alright, like I said, I want 2 Forest. I'm not counting the 3-drops for the mana base, but the Traveler's Amulet gives us a 3rd green source. And then, okay, this is definitely not going to happen. Then we can look at black and blue, and we see that blue is really almost a splash color. If we want to cast Wavecrash Triton and the 2 Nimbus Naiads on 3, then, or we also have the Shipwreck Singer, that's basically 4 guys for which we would need 5 or 6 sources. On the other hand, this does make the Wavecrash Triton look a bit weaker than I thought. It might be better to just play a black card instead to make it more likely that we can cast it. Shipwreck Singer and Shipwreck Singer and Nimbus Naiad are powerful enough on their own that I want them, but the Wavecrash Triton is in this particular deck only a little better than Fellhide Minotaur, and maybe not even that, because of the devotion to black theme and whatnot. Alright, after thinking about it, I think that we're just keeping the Wavecrash Triton because of Baleful Eidolon and the 2 Nimbus Naiad, so we can still make use of the trigger, and then it's usually worth it. And then we do need a little bit more blue sources, but that should be fine. If we play 5 islands, I think we are on the safe side, and that leaves us with 10 Swamps and the Traveler's Amulet, which should be enough to cast the black spells. Kind of happy. This mana base doesn't look awful, and this deck looks like a ton of fun. Let's see how that goes.